Imagine being born in a country, building its economy, fighting in its wars, but being told you are not a citizen, not because of anything you did, but because of the color of your skin. In part 1, we discussed the Dred Scott v. Sandford Supreme Court decision, where the court ruled that Black people, enslaved or free, had no rights the white man was bound to respect. But after the Civil War, America tried to right its wrongs through a series of amendments designed to equalize the playing field for formerly enslaved Black people. Did it work? Let's talk about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments and how white supremacy fought back. The 13th Amendment is famously credited for abolishing slavery, but lawmakers included a dangerous loophole in its writing. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, shall exist within the United States. Except as a punishment for crime, kept a swinging door open for continued enslavement and oppression of Black people. After slavery ended, Southern states found a new way to control Black labor. Vagrancy laws and Black codes made it illegal just to be Black and unemployed. Black men were arrested en masse, then leased out to plantations, railroads, and factories for free. Slavery never ended. It was rebranded as mass incarceration. And that system, that is now the prison industrial complex, has disproportionately kept Black people, specifically Black men, in a state of slavery ever since. After Dred Scott v. Sandford ruled that Black people weren't U.S. citizens, Congress fought back with the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. For the first time, Black Americans had legal citizenship and equal protection under the law, at least in theory. The 14th Amendment was a promise, but America, controlled by a deep sense of white supremacy, had no intention of keeping it. The 15th Amendment gave Black men the right to vote, and for a brief moment, it worked. Over 2,000 Black men were elected to office during Reconstruction. 22 Black men were elected to Congress. Hiram Revels became the first Black U.S. Senator in 1870. For the first time, Black men held political power. As we learned last week, checks and balances works to ensure laws are enacted, implemented, and properly interpreted. So the executive branch had to implement ways to enforce these amendments, especially in the South, where segregation and Black codes held a stronghold. During what is considered the Reconstruction era, federal troops occupied the South to enforce civil rights protections for Black Americans. Black communities thrived, businesses, schools, and churches were built. The Freedmen's Bureau helped formerly enslaved people transition to freedom. But these steps didn't come without intense and violent backlash. New forms of oppression emerged. Mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex continued exploitation of Black labor, a direct byproduct of white racial backlash of the 13th Amendment. The 14th Amendment defined birthright citizenship, which is still debated in modern immigration law. Civil rights cases relied on the 14th Amendment to strike down segregation. The implementation of the 15th Amendment led to voter disenfranchisement that disproportionately targeted Black communities. The Ku Klux Klan used terror to suppress Black voters. Southern states passed literacy tests, poll taxes, and grandfather clauses to block Black people from voting. By 1900, Black political power had nearly disappeared. And then came 1877. Immediately after the presidential election of 1876, it became clear that the outcome of the race hinged largely on disputed returns from Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina, the only 3 states in the South with Reconstruction-era Republican governments still in power. A secret deal was made. In exchange for the presidency, Republican Rutherford Hayes agreed to pull federal troops from the South. Reconstruction was over. The South reasserted white supremacy, and the promise of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments gone. But violence wasn't the only tool of white supremacy. Propaganda played its part too. Birth of a Nation, a 1915 film, was America's first blockbuster. It glorified the Ku Klux Klan, depicting them as noble heroes. Black men were portrayed as dangerous criminals who preyed on white women. Even President Woodrow Wilson praised the film, calling it history written with lightning. But in reality, it was a racist fantasy designed to justify Jim Crow. A movie brought back the Klan and reshaped American racism. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments changed America forever, but they weren't enough to fully secure Black freedom. Reconstruction promised a new future, but white supremacy fought back, and the fight for true freedom continues. In our next class, we'll dive into landmark Supreme Court cases like Plessy versus Ferguson and the fight for Black civil rights in the 20th century. If you listen to the end, tell me in the comments, if you had to explain the real impact of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to someone who had never heard of them before, what would you say in one sentence?